Hello everybody and welcome back to Juno New Origins, where we've been working on our deep space variant of our planet lander here, and I absolutely do think that we should move this over to Carolox in this nose cone here, and we should expand out this tank. Actually, this is the battery here. We should expand this tank specifically, because I want this to have roughly 2 tons of xenon. That's 4 tons. 4 tons is maybe a little too much, but let's think about what that might look like. So our starting thrust to weight here is 1.21 in vacuum, but it's 0.99 like this. So we've definitely got a heavier payload. But we have this kick stage here. It should be reasonably okay. We're going to be a little bit negative in the first little while here of this burn. So that's definitely potentially problematic. We could expand like this engine. This single engine in the center of each of these, just to get it to 1.0. But to be honest, it's going to burn as it is. It's going to burn very quickly, right? It's going to increase its thrust to weight very quickly. So I think overall, this is going to be relatively fine. I have a couple of concerns still. The major concern at this point is that this ion propulsion stage is going to take burns that in real world time is going to be measured in hours. Even with the 2x boost. That's my main concern right now. If that's the case, this is not really going to be viable because I can't have this just sit there burning for hours and hours and hours, right? So we would have to think about something different at that point. Or find a workaround. I don't know what that workaround would be yet. But let's go ahead and give this a test launch here. This is going to be very, very low thrust to weight to start with, and we're going to have that sound issue right away. What issues do we have? We're too tall. That makes sense. That does make sense. So we should probably consider dropping the size of this tank, I'm thinking. So this would be that this would come down to like 3 meters. Is that going to be enough? Let's find out. Needs to drop by another 1.5 meters. So this needs to be down to just 1.5 meters. So that's going to be significantly less in this kick stage. Understood. Definitely understood. Okay, we'll see what this feels like. That is going to mean that our thrust to weight off the... I was going to say off the pad, but there is no pad here. Our thrust to weight in the water is going to be higher than what we anticipated, and that's a good thing. But I'm wondering if this kick stage will be enough to get us into orbit at this point. It might be. It might be. Okay, so I launched it, and now, of course, we need to ditch this sound volume. There we go. Let's put ourselves at 85 degrees east. And as usual, I'm not going to make you sit through the slideshow. We'll be back when we're just about ready to detach these boosters. See you guys in just a moment. Okay, so here we are nearing the end of the slideshow at this point, and we're attempting to get over to 45 degrees and apparently doing a poor job of it because we bounced at 45 and started coming back up. But whatever, it's fine. These SRBs detaching now, that of course means we can turn the sound back on. There we go. That's going to be very helpful. And we can drop this down to about a 20-degree pitch or so, because we need to be building up as much lateral speed as possible right now. So there we go, that's all looking good, and we can actually drop this significantly lower than this. Let's put this at about 5-degree pitch now. Now let's be building up that lateral speed. Our apoapsis is going up, but that's fine for the time being. Okay, this seems to be pretty under control as far as the overshoot goes. So I'm just going to put this right on a pitch of 0 for the moment. That looks fine. So let's see how we do on our orbital insertion. That's question 1. And then question 2 is just how long are those ion engine burns going to be? Remember, in KSP, we could go up to 4x, which would help, but they were still very, very long burns. So that is absolutely a concern. No doubt about that. We're definitely a little heavier, and I'm wondering how long this burn time will be. If it's even worth carrying this along, it might not be worth it, since we're constrained by rocket height. We could reduce the amount of solid fuel in this, I suppose. In this stage here, and increase the fuel here is probably much more efficient that way, I would think. So that's a potential option. We can think about doing it that way. Yeah, I can see here that we're definitely pretty short of orbital velocity on our SRBs. We were short previously, but this is definitely very short. Okay. So let's go ahead and fire up this engine. We've got about 35... Okay, yeah, this is only about 400 meters per second. So this is not going to achieve orbit here with this amount of fuel. I definitely anticipated this having more fuel in this stage, so I think stealing some fuel from that center core, or rather stealing some vertical height from that center core and putting it into this fuel tank may make a fair amount of sense. For the time being, let's see how close this gets us. It's going to be reasonably close, but ultimately not particularly close. So now we're in this situation, and I definitely want to extend our solar panels, keeping an eye on battery capacity. We've got all of these engines firing at this point, and you can see just how much thrust we don't have. So that is absolutely understood. We're not going to have to do any fuel transfer since this is now Carolox again up here. And we've got our battery here. That'll be jettisoned when we go to this stage up here, so that'll be absolutely fine. As far as the actual fuel time, we can see here that we definitely have 13 kilometers per second in this. The problem is that this is very, 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 very low thrust, right? So let's bring this up to 2x speed here. This is not going to put us into orbital velocity at all, but what I'm trying to gauge right now is how long of battery burn time we have. The answer is pretty long. We're down to 97, so it's definitely visibly moving the amount of battery, right? So if we go in here, we can see it draining. And it's draining at roughly 1 kilowatt hour per second. So that's a pretty hefty amount of battery life. So that's good. Of course, what's less good is the fact that we're not in orbit at this time. So that's definitely a concern. This is extremely high specific impulse, but it's also extremely low thrust. That's just the way ion engines work. So I think what we're going to have to do is exactly what I was talking about. So we'll pull this back and let's drop the amount of fuel in that center SRB stage. And what we're going to do is I want to detach this here, and I want to bring this down by like... I don't even know what it was previously. So let's put this to about 15 meters. Like that. We'll reattach this. Like that. And now what we can do, of course, is we can pull this off and pull this off. And we can add, I don't know, maybe like 4 meters onto this. I don't know how much I even did there. Let's put this up to 4 meters for now. Sure, 4.06 for the moment. And we'll see how much height differential we need. So can we add additional height onto this at this point is the question. So that's under here. Okay, yes, we can add additional height. So I want to pop off this tank. And I want to bring this up to, we'll try 5 meters. Still looking great. Okay, we'll try 6 meters. Now it's too tall. Needs to come down by 1 meter. So 5.05. Let's try that. That's still looking good. Let's try 5.1. 5.11 should be too much. Yes. 5.09 should be the perfect amount. Yes. Okay. So now we can try this launch again. And we're going to have a shorter burn in the SRB here, but a much, much longer Methalox burn. So we'll see what that ends up feeling like. Let's put this out in the water. And let's get this thing launched. Again, I'm not going to make you watch the intro to this launch. We'll get that done off camera. See you guys in just a moment. Okay, so here we are about to detach the slideshow machine here. We've got about 4 seconds of burn time left. As you can see, we've overshot a little bit on the horizontal trajectory. That's fine. We don't actually mind that. So we're a little lower, but let's get that detachment done. Perfect. Now we can turn our sound back on because it will no longer be horrifically bugged. There we go. And we're at about 55 kilometers. I'm thinking that we drop our pitch down to about 20 degrees for right now. And of course, this stage will burn a lot faster this time. So that is absolutely understood. We want to get up out of the atmosphere. So I'm bringing us down to about 10 degrees here, but I want to keep burning somewhere around here. We don't quite have enough altitude here. So that's definitely noted. Note how that time to apoapsis is actually dropping. So we're going to have to adjust our overall trajectory somewhat here. We're going to need to bring this up a little bit and get a little bit more verticality out of this. So that is understood. The thrust to weight here is not phenomenal, but that's fine. It doesn't have to be. It's high enough. So now our apoapsis is up in space, and I'd like to drop us down at this point to about I'm thinking like a 7-degree pitch for the moment. Because I don't want to overshoot this too much, right? There we go. That's about right. Now we can put it down to about 0. And we're going to run out of this stage very, very shortly. So this apoapsis going up nicely. Our lateral velocity needs to build up a fair amount more. And we've still got like 150 meters per second in this SRB. That's absolutely fine. We'll detach that shortly. Okay. And off we go on our Methalox engine. So that looks great. This now has 1.26 kilometers per second in it, so that looks wonderful. That's going to be enough to get us into orbit for sure. What's our thrust to weight? 1.02? So that's probably good enough then. So this is mostly intended to be a kick stage to get us into orbit. The main problem, of course, remains that this ion engine is going to be extremely low thrust to weight. Now, the ion engine would be fantastic if it wasn't carrying this heavy of a payload. This is a pretty heavy payload for an ion engine, and that's why the burn times are going to be so very, very long. And there's also probably too much fuel in the ion engine section, is my current belief. We should probably cut that down, but I want to know by how much. But there's definitely going to be wasted xenon, which is expensive stuff. For now, though, I just want to make sure that we are viable on getting to orbit with this amount of mass, and that we can do some semblance of orbital maneuvers, right? That would be the idea here. So for right now, we're just burning this up, and we're going to bring our apoapsis to probably around 150, somewhere around there. You'll note that this stage is nearly burned out at this point. We burned 70% of its fuel, and that is understood. The point of this stage is to just get this thing into a stable orbit, right? And the higher the orbit, the better, is the way that that works. So one thing I'm thinking about potentially doing, and this is probably a terrible idea, but one thing I was thinking about doing is, let's get that punched up a little further. There we go. We're basically in orbit right now. But one thing I was thinking about doing was getting us into a position where we would be able to fire that main, like that center stage of SRBs at the same time as the outer ring of SRBs. That'll cause even more performance issues. I don't know if I actually want to do that, but it's an interesting idea anyway. So 66 meters per second to get ourselves into orbit here. That's not bad. So let's get that done. Oh, that's our station. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. It just looked like it was in the same orbit, but it wasn't. Okay, so we've got 6% fuel left here. That got us into a 150 by 150 kilometer orbit. I would like it if this brought us up a lot higher than this. A lot higher. But alas, I don't think that's going to be a thing. So for now, this is absolutely fine. We've got like 95 meters per second left, right? So if we wanted to burn, say, hypothetically here, and we wanted to do an escape velocity burn, this is going to be an extremely difficult burn for us to pull off. That actually just takes us to Atraitus. Well, okay then. That's kind of wild. We'd want a pretty minimal encounter with Atraitus, to be honest. So something kind of like this, although we'd need a pretty long braking burn, so maybe like 10 gigameters or something like that. Approximately like that. So that would be 1.61 kilometers per second. We can execute that burn, but this isn't going to go well, and I will show you why. It should be pretty obvious, to be honest, but I will demonstrate here. So we finish up this burn, no problem. This section is all absolutely fine. And then we go into this section. This burn time would be 2.55 days. So this is obviously extremely problematic, right? 2.55 days is, this is not viable at this time. We don't have a way to, wait a second. Okay, so this is still not viable right now, but that's interesting. I forgot that you can actually go into time warp rather than physics warp with ion engines. Okay. That alleviates one of my major concerns. Now, we could just take multiple passes, right? That is a theoretical option. We can take multiple passes, raise this each time, burn from like here to here, and call it good. Like I said, I would much rather end up in a much higher orbit, and that might be something that we want to target. In order to do that, there's a couple things we can do, and I'm going to pull this back. That just proved to me the viability of this design. The fact that we can actually do full-on time warp while in ion engine burn. I had remembered reading that previously with one of the pop-ups that it says, but I'd completely forgotten about it. So the fact that that's the case is a big deal for us. That's a very big deal. So there's a couple of things that we can do if we want to push this into a higher orbit. We cannot make this rocket taller, but what we can do is we can have more fuel here. Now, that's going to cause us a bit of a problem in that our thrust to weight down here is going to get spicy if we do that. As it is right now, we barely overcome gravity at the beginning of this. But, like I said previously, there's something we can do about that. And that is that we can go into our staging and we can move all of these engines into here. Now, this interstage is going to need to be moved down to here, like this. And then the Wyvern engine would fire at the same time as these interstages, because this is going to need to be separated before these are. So that's going to be a fairly significant change for us in terms of how this flight profile goes. We're going to lose this gyroscope a lot earlier, and that's going to be interesting. This is also going to be lower performance because all of these engines are going to be burning at once. It's going to be interesting. But that does give us a starting thrust to weight of 1.18, which is slightly better. It's not phenomenal, that's for sure. We may want to think about just increasing the price of this and going for bigger engines on this rather than the ridiculous amount of tiny ones. But this is still cheap. Like, this is 11.3 million, so this is costing us like 12 million per launch right now. This is still very cheap, even with all of this Xenon, which, to be clear, I still think is overkill on the Xenon. But honestly, looking at this price here, I'm kind of okay with it. Like, for a deep space probe that can land on bodies, this is very cheap. Very, very, very cheap. So that's all absolutely noted. I think we'll give this one more launch attempt, and I'm tempted to not cut out the ascent this time on all of these SRBs, just because we've made changes, and I think I'm not going to. Prepare yourself for a slideshow. It's not going to be pretty. Okay, so let's immediately launch this as soon as it's done loading. Okay, now we gotta turn off the sound because the sound is going to be even more bugged. There we go. And let's bring this over to 85. That'll do. And let's go. So I'm going to put this in 2x speed here, and yeah, it's going to do this. This is expected. This is the price we pay for a very cheap launch. To be honest, this is performing about the same. It's not substantially worse than what it was doing previously. So that's not too bad. But we need to keep an eye on this center core's fuel amount, because this is going to be the first thing to go. And that's going to save us a fair amount of weight later on. So these will carry us a little further. I'm not able to click on the center core right now. Let's try pausing it. That does give us some additional performance. Not a lot, but it does give us some. And that allows us to then see, yeah, you can see here, 83% and 78%. Okay, so let's resume this for now. There we go. And we need to keep an eye on this because when this hits 0, we need to do a staging event. And we should be on 2x speed right now because we want to get through this as quickly as we can. We've got about 90 seconds of burn time in this stage, and I don't know if that's counting this or all of this fuel. It's hard to say. I'm going to pin this open, and I want to double check. Yeah, these are definitely being pulled from still. Good. It's exactly what I wanted to see. So our thrust to weight is pretty okay at this point, right? We're at 1.7, and we're expecting our thrust to weight to go up a lot faster in this So this potentially gives us some headroom to put additional power up here, additional mass up here, if we really wanted to. I'm not sure how much we can get away with, but it's definitely going to be some. No doubt about that. So we're currently at an apoapsis of about 7 kilometers. Once we hit 10, we're going to be targeting 70 degrees here. Same ascent profile as before. So we're just about to 10 kilometers. There we go. Now I'm going to bring this over to 70 degrees. There we go. And we'll see if this thing is able to hold attitude there. Should be able to. We should have enough speed that our fins will do the work. Okay, so we've got about 27% fuel remaining in our center core here. Our overall fuel amount is a little higher than that. So that's looking fine for the moment. Apoapsis is reaching 30. At 30, we want to drop this thing over to about 45 degrees. Now, that's a significant drop, and it may overshoot this. We'll see how that feels. It undershot it. That's interesting. Yeah, it definitely undershot. Not the worst thing in the world since we're angling for a high apoapsis here. So let's ditch this center core right about now. Well then. That was not ideal. Obviously, that wasn't what I was looking for. So let's pull this back. And there appears to be a staging issue. Or the center core collided with the outer cores. That is a possibility. Oh, I know what it is. The outer cores are attached to the center core. So we have to hold the center core and its mass until the outer cores run out. Or attach the outer cores up higher. That's the other option. So that would mean that we would need these guys to be attached like up here, right? But it would actually have to be attached like up here. Like that. And then they would get attached all the way up here. We're going to have to wait for it to calculate all of that fuel there. Or rather, all the engines. And then we'd want to move them down to be about there or so. Thereabouts. Now you can see this is a little too low. So I'm kind of thinking maybe we add in a little bit of fuel up here. Potentially. So that would mean bringing these guys up to somewhere around here, maybe like 22 meters in height. Now, this is going to cut down our thrust to weight. But that's actually 1.01, so this is the same thrust to weight we had before. That's very interesting. Okay, let's check this staging. So that's all of these engines, and then the interstage there, which hopefully would cleanly separate. I don't know if it actually will. And then we separate these guys and fire up the Wyvern engine at that point. So that gets us more distance, more burn time out of these engines, right? And then in theory, we would ditch this. I don't know if this is going to safely detach. We can continue working on that, though, next episode. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Andy McGard, Dark Horse, Xenocyte, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, The Lounge STL, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.